in the coffin of those chasing championship glory. Scene in which Sam Blacklock wrapped up the Season 3 title, he could be about to do it again as the Monday Night V8 Supercars official series heads to the penultimate round out of 12, taking us to the grueling Phillip Island circuit for one of, if not the longest race of the season, in which the drivers will be contesting a mammoth 46 laps solo. In these cases, pace alone is not enough to walk away with the victor's trophy. You have to be smart in the pits and cunning in your on-track onslaught to the front. And best of all, SimSpeed TV on the iRacing Esports Network will have every second covered as we reach the final few hurdles in this stunning 2018 Season 4 Championship. My name is Bo Albert, and alongside me, but very much taller than me too, is Mr. Zachary Hanlon with Mr. Scott Fountain, who has only just stopped tearing up over the Real World Supercars Championship finale. We'll be covering all the angles of this race. And Zach, well, when it comes to this race in this kind of length, there really is more than just one angle the drivers can attack it from.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you really got to just keep your mind focused for a really extended period of time. Make sure you don't get too, get too heavy behind the eyes. It's very easy to become frustrated, especially in these longer races, and to feel very doubtful about how the result's going to come out at the end. So just to be able to stay positive and keep on trucking through the whole event is going to be difficult for some. We're probably, what are we expecting here? About an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes worth of racing, possibly even more than that. So, and I believe that we're going to be having roughly 2 pit stop as well. I think we've already done a couple of calculations, and I don't think that guys are going to be able to get it done in 1 pit stop, but we will see how they do go this evening. But yes, it is going to be very difficult for all the drivers involved this evening. But as always, we do have an absolutely stellar field with some very exciting names and some very big names in the Australian iRacing scene as well. So we should be in for a very good evening of racing.
Yeah, we do. And one of those names is Josh Rogers, who is a little bit of a talking point in sim racing at the moment. Of course, recently announced that he would be leaving Burst Esports, and many drivers and people in the sim racing community questioning if TTL could be getting the boot as well. Of course, nothing been announced and still rocking those colors at the moment as well. So not hurting his pace as well, because he currently leads the top of the timesheets, but only by a 10th of a second over Brett Loxton. And for Brett Loxton to be that close to Josh Rogers, he really is trying to put in a really strong effort to end this season, which is what he needs to do. Of course, we're at 25-degree track temperature here today, which is not the hottest it could have been, so the tyres will be lasting a little bit longer, but still, they will probably need to take tyres at every single pit stop this time around in the race. You can see Loxton really pushing hard on this current lap, and a couple of drivers actually ducking out of their second lap, so not willing to make it happen after the tyres are beyond their best by date on that first lap. But one driver that is only on his out lap at the moment is Sam Blacklock, so he's playing it a lot later and still yet to start his very first lap. So he's only warming up at the moment, but he'll be a driver, of course, to keep an eye on, as are many drivers actually taking it a lot later in the session to start their lap. And that's not something we usually see, Zach. Normally, in these solo qualifying sessions, the drivers are straight out on track.
Well, they do have a big race ahead of them, so maybe some guys are just getting their final preparations under the belt, but it does seem like most of the guys are on track. We've got Sam Blacklock, Daryl Van der Geer, who's another one who hasn't set a lap yet, is currently out there, as is Zach Baker and Jacob Knight as well. So everyone is definitely out on track, but yeah, some people just like starting later. I know sometimes from time to time, I don't mind going out just a little bit later just to kind of gauge where your opponents are and how much you really need to hang it on the line. Obviously, you want to put in the best lap you can no matter what, but just to be able to get some kind of gauge as to what you really need to do can kind of help you prepare for that lap for some people. So Sam Blacklock, though, he's doing very well in this championship at the moment, as he's now coming into Honda Corner on his qualifying lap. And he's been doing a really great job all season. Admittedly, the last few races hasn't had the best qualifying performances. Did manage to get it into second last week and obviously move himself into P1 before the first corner. But he's going to have to pull something here because Brett Loxton's time is extremely competitive, and it's going to be difficult for anyone other than a handful of people to knock off Josh Rogers, but Sam Blacklock's probably in that group of people that might be able to make it work. So he's coming down through MG now. It's looked a fairly good lap. He's been locking up the front tires quite substantially, so he's obviously running a very heavy front bias in that car to try and get that stopped as much as he possibly can as he rounds the final corner now, clipping the apex nicely there, not using too much of that inside curb, which can really unsettle the car. He's coming down the straight, comes under the Melbourne Australia Bridge and puts himself position number 2, just 1/100th or 15 thousandths of a second behind current pole man Josh Rogers, but he's still got another lap in the bank to Sam Blacklock. And I don't know, I've used this V8 Supercar in this current build, and I don't necessarily think that the first lap is always the best. I think you can still get some good tire life out of those Dunlops on the second run. So we'll see if he can make anything else work here.
Yeah, well, that could be crucial information for Sam Blacklock. Oh, of course, he's running a little bit wide there through the hairpin and sliding it a bit on the X as well. So perhaps the grip not quite there for the TTR driver, and I think he's just rolled out of the throttle there too. So for Sam Blacklock, not going to happen on the second lap. But how about Mario Vlasic? He is still on his very first lap, so the tires are up to temperature, and currently the only driver yet to set a lap time. So Vlasic once again going for the slightly later session, or later attempt in the session, as he has almost become a trademark of his. But he won't even get the second lap in. So this first lap, it's all or nothing. Has to make every millimeter count around this final few corners at the beautiful Phillip Island circuit. Rounding the long left-hander, then power on as soon as he can, run it out to the grass without touching it at all. And Mario Vlasic in the number 10 car for tonight. Will he go P number 10? No, it's only going to be P17. So not quite what he would have been looking for, but nonetheless, just over a second off pole. So that shows just how close this field is once again, Zach.
Yeah, absolutely. Just having a 1 second gap between first and 17th is a real credit to all these drivers, and just goes to prove that we're going to have a good night of racing here. We've even got like some little groups of cars. Scott Zizlowski and Chris Coxhead and Guy Leach all sitting within about 300ths of a second of each other. And there are many more examples of that throughout the field. But for tonight, Josh K. Rogers will take you away from pole position. He'll be joined on the front row, the goodbye championship leader, Sam Blacklock. The man chasing down Sam, Brett Loxton, will start from position number 3. So it's going to be a very interesting battle throughout this race. And the young man, Cooper Webster from Evolution Racing Team, will start from position number 4. Jackson Harlow, who's been putting in some good performances, will start P number 5 against his best mate in racing. So from what we've seen the last few weeks, Harley Haber. So that's going to be pretty interesting the first few laps. Brady Myers and Brenton Hobson will take out row number 4 with Thomas McMillan and James Duckworth rounding out the top 10.
Row number 6 will contest of Carl Stokes and Ross Rizzo, who's making yet another start. So he's becoming a bit of a regular, which is great to see. One driver that is already a regular is Steve Jansen. He's going to line up in position number 13 ahead of Scott Zaslowski and Guy Leach for your top 15. Chris Coxhead will kick things off on row number 8 in P number 16 with Mario Vlasic alongside, and Jacob Knight, in position number 18. Brendan Jackson will line up in 19th ahead of Sam Sutton, who's making a return to the series as well, but a little bit further down than he perhaps would have liked, with David Miller, Martin Hallinan, Zach Baker, and Daryl Van Den Geer lining up for the 24 cars that will make up 46 laps here at Phillip Island. And Zach, this run into turn number 1 can always be a little bit scary, and well, I'm having a bit of technical issues, so the start, it's all yours.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bo. I can say from good experience, having completely ruined a V8 Scop Split 2 race pretty much from this exact standing position, that it is very difficult run down into turn number 1. So we'll hope that these guys have a little more professionalism than I have shown in the past and can carry it very cleanly through the first couple of corners. But it is Josh K. Rogers who stares down the beautiful Victorian coastline down towards the sea at turn number 1. The revs are rising and they are away, and a nice start there from Sam Blacklock. Got a very good jump and is going to make himself up alongside Josh K. Rogers as they come into turn number 1, as did Cooper Webster on Brett Loxton as well. but Brett Loxton does manage to slide through as, oh, a little bit of contact there from Jackson Harlow and Cooper Webster there. So getting a little bit tight up in the midfield as they start going 2 by 2 through the southern loop now and coming through that exit. I think that's Steve Jansen, got a pretty poor run coming out of the southern loop. So he's going to have to make it up, but they're side by side coming into Honda corner. Jackson Harlow, Brendan Hobson, and late on the brakes there, and all just pulling up. A couple of cars there, Ross Rizzo locking up a brake, and a couple of cars in the rear of the field getting very close to each other, but for the most part, it's a very clean start there, and very good jump from Josh Rogers, having to, Sam Blacklock having to concede at turn 1, as did Cooper Webster, but everyone's managed to make it through fairly unscathed so far, and very nice little battles starting to form.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam Sutton up the inside of Mario Vlasic, but the big talking point of lap 1 has to be heading in.
Sorry, Brendan Hobson's just gone into Jackson Harlow, and Brady Myers has snuck by the both of them. We'll get a replay of that, for you, ladies and gentlemen, as they were coming down into MG. And unfortunately, we're just looking on board now with Brendan Hobson. Just gets himself a little bit too deep into MG there and collects Jackson Harlow, and does do a very gracious thing there, does Brendan Hobson, and lets Jackson back by. So good respect there from Brendan Hobson, but unfortunately Jackson Harlow is going to have a little bit of damage to that car, and he's going to have some positions to make up as well.
Yeah, he will, as Steve Jansen tries to go the long way around the outside at turn number 1. Does not work and only leaves himself vulnerable to Carl Stokes, who had a massive moment at turn number 1 on the very... sorry, not turn number 1. Turn number 4, heading on the first lap, and almost did an Alexander Prema and James Courtney just a couple of years back. You can see they're trying to go the long way around the outside. Look at them all just bottlenecking at this hairpin, all different braking boxes. And Steve Jansen goes up the inside, around the middle. Shades of Ricardo Zonta, Mika Hakkinen, and Michael Schumacher at Spa, heading into the hairpin. This mid-pack is not dying down at all. You can see Brendan Jackson now looking up the inside of Sam Sutton, who was hung out to dry on the outside, but will now, for the second lap in a row, have to go side by side through Hayshed. So this mid-pack refusing to let up at all. A little bit on the curve for Sam Sutton, leaves him out a little bit wide, and now has to go the long way around the outside, heading into Lukey Heights. And this is a very sketchy part of the circuit, but Brendan Jackson all over the curb almost makes it happen as they fight now on the brakes. And again, Sam Sutton up the inside, so constantly changing positions in this little mid-pack. It's the 7 versus the 17, and just in front of this pack as well, we have the driver Slosky making a pass on Croxhead as well, constantly changing. But for the race leaders, more importantly, Josh Rogers and Sam Blacklock off to a fantastic start, like you mentioned, Zach, already breaking away, and Cooper Webster and Ross Rizzo and Brett Loxton all struggling a little bit behind just to keep in contact.
Yeah, I think Brett Loxton's really struggling. Cooper Webster's been looking pretty strong and looking for a way past him, as Harley Haber's also kind of tucked in behind Cooper Webster as well. But Kyle Stokes is having a little bit to contend with. He's trying to make his way up past Steve Jansen, and just behind them, I think Mario Vlasic has just had a bit of he's gotten a bit of a run by, and David Miller's going to try and go for a move around the outside into Honda, very late on the brakes, but unfortunately just locks up that inside right tire, does David Miller. He's not going to be able to make that one work. But yeah, Brett Loxton does look like he's struggling at the moment comparatively, and Cooper Webster almost had a move done down into Honda the last time round, but wasn't quite close enough, or wasn't really worth risking at the time for Cooper Webster. We've still got a long way to go in this race, and there's going to be a few more opportunities, we hope, for him to get by, so opting to find another opportunity. And since Brady Myers managed to sneak past Jackson Harlow as well, he's been doing a good job to catch back up. Yes, Bo?
We have Carl Stokes off the road, and that was from a big hit at the back by Sam Sutton at the hairpin. I believe it's called MG, and unfortunately he has done all kinds of 360s. Back on the road now, but dumped all the way to last unceremoniously. So for Carl Stokes, it has not been the race he would have wanted. Off into the grass on lap number 1, off into the grass on lap number 3 as well.
Yeah, that was very unfortunate there. I think Sam just got a little bit, a little bit eager under brakes there, and unfortunately knocked Kyle off into the dust. But just having a look now with Harley Haber, he starts to fall off Cooper Webster just a little bit. but still keeping in check with that little group of cars ahead. And it's important for him to keep that position and try and keep up with those guys, because we've seen the last few weeks himself and Jackson Harlow have really been going very hard in terms of door-to-door racing. So I'm sure that he knows that if Jackson gets up near him and he's following Brady Mize at the moment, who's just one car behind Haber, if Jackson can get up to Haber there, then those guys are really going to be duking it out. And I'm sure that they'll be having a lot of fun while doing so. But for the sake of their races, they're probably not going to want to get too involved with each other for as long as they can. So be really good for Harley if he's able to keep himself where he is and just try and follow that little train there of Cooper Webster and Brett Loxton. But Brett Loxton does seem to have picked up the pace a little bit now. Lap times coming in a little bit more respectably and maintaining that gap up to Sam Blacklock, who's about 1.6 seconds up the road of him at the moment. So 129.9 for Loxton last time around and 129.8 for Blacklock. So definitely picked up the pace, has Brett Loxton, but he's going to have to find a little bit more if he gets back up into if he wants to get back up into second position.
Yeah, absolutely. So for him, the race is not over by any stretch of the imagination because, of course, it is such a long race. It's a little bit of a different ball game to what we usually see. So all these drivers having to adjust, their driving style, their aggression a little bit more as they all funnel into the Honda hairpin. Once again, you can see so many of the drivers locking up. One of the battles that is slowly heating up a little bit is Ross Rizzo, who has Guy Leach just behind. But Scott Zazlowski is all over the back of Guy Leach as well in the Valentino Rossi car once again. So Zazlowski had a bit of a slow start to the race, looked a bit under pressure in the early laps, but all of a sudden, he is the driver beginning to put a bit of pressure on in the All-Star Motorsports Commodore, and you can see just diving a lot of different lines around this Phillip Island circuit. Of course, it's such a flowing circuit with so many different elevation changes and, of course, corners and different radiuses and cambers that you really can try all kinds of different things. But we will move our attention up to Brenton Hobson, who is in the battle with Jackson Susan Harlow. Of course, is trying to get to the back of Harley Haber just in front, but it's not happening. You can see that Brenton Hobson just trying a slightly wider entry to carry the speed a little bit more. You can see this long front straight getting closer and closer. Will the Synergy Sim Racing car, but being such a long race, will he go for the inside? It's Brenton Hobson, so we'll think about it, but nothing more than a think. He'll back out and once again just follow Jackson Harlow for another few laps. And the pace over the last few laps has been pretty respectable for Hobbo compared to Jackson. Only about 0.2 of a second quicker, so he's not losing a massive amount of time. But still, in a race long as this, you don't want to lose touch with the fast guys too early on.
Yeah, well, it just starts compounding to an unrecoverable amount eventually. And I think that most of these guys have got some pretty good pace right now. Even, we're 6 laps in, we're seeing down to about 10th position is nearly 8 seconds off the lead, which is close to a second a lap. So it's really interesting that, once these guys get racing, that the pace that we saw in qualifying doesn't necessarily translate massively through that. Although that being said, down to 10th is only 8 seconds, but then 10th through to 20th is only an additional 7 to 8 seconds as well. So looks like everyone's starting to spread out fairly evenly. That also probably does have a little bit to do with this circuit, though. Is a very fun circuit to drive, and you can make opportunities for overtaking around here, but a lot of the time you really do have to rely on a mistake from your opponent so that you can really get up there. And as we can see at the moment, no one really able to do much in terms of the pace of the leaders. But we'll just having a look with Cooper Webster on screen at the moment, and he is looking very aggressive right now on Brett Loxton. Brett Loxton going for that wider mid corner, carry some more exit speed through the tail end of the corner, and that's paid off for him there. It's going to hold off an attack from Cooper unless he's got a few extra ponies under there, maybe a NOS button he can use to catch up a little bit. But unfortunately, not going to be breaking any technical regulations this evening is Cooper Webster. He'll remain behind Brett Loxton for the time being and stare at the back of that KRF machine. But Brett Loxton, I mean, he's really the guy that has to make a move, isn't he? He's got to get positions to try and get this championship fight back on track, and he's not doing a good job right now. He's made a big mistake coming through the exit of Hayshed and into Lukey Heights there, and now Cooper Webster's really back on him. And one thing I've noticed from a lot of these guys as well, Bo, is a lot of people seem to be locking up the front tires on these cars. It'd be interesting to see if guys start suffering from understeer issues because they're just using up those front tires as they get to the later parts of their stints.
Well, you definitely have to think so, wouldn't you? Of course, Phillip Island being such a high-load circuit with all these fast corners where you're putting so much stress through the car, as we are looking at Scott Sislowski, who's right underneath the rear wing of that Guy Leach there. We'll see what he decides to do into towards turn number 1. He's going to look up the inside, and he's going to brake so much later as in a different postcode on the brakes, and he will almost get the overlap, but Guy Leach thinks about it, trying to sneak it up the inside once more, but can't do anything about it. So Sislowski makes the move happen. But we'll see what can happen as well. Up the front as well, it's getting a little bit close with the drivers, including Thomas Miller and Ross Rizzo, with also, I believe that's James Duckworth, who's just blinking in and out just a little bit in front as well. These guys are all very close. This little back of the field is very, very tight. But there we go. McMillan locking the brakes. Duckworth locking the brakes. They're all just pinching it a bit. And look at Zlosky almost getting turned by Guy Leach there. He was putting a nose where a nose probably should not have been through that corner. And that could have been a bit of a turnaround for Sislowski, but fortunately they all get away with it. But like you say, come the end of these stints, their tyres are going to be screaming for mercy. And it could very well be a case of who's preserving the tyres best. And well, I'm noticing the lead between Josh Rogers and Blacklock is now stretched out to a bit over a second. I'm just wondering if Blacklock is maybe saving tyres just a little bit in an effort to go a little bit longer than Rogers and really pull the margin back late in the race, when sometimes we have seen Rogers be a little bit weaker.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say, isn't it? You know, Josh Rogers is very fast, and you know, Blacklock could be just keeping up with him. But we'll go with you now to Cooper Webster, because he's finally very close to the back of Brett Loxton now. If he can take a bit of a wider line here, he might be able to make an exit work and do something down into Honda. And he has been waiting for a move like this for a very long time. Unfortunately, I think he's just a little bit too far back once again. But as I was saying, with Josh, you just don't know how fast and how quickly he's going, whether you're driving against him or whether you're in the position that we are now, where we're just observing. It's very difficult to tell just how hard he is going, because he could be going 100%, or he could be going, you know, out on his just Sunday afternoon drive. So usually he's a man that always goes 100%. So we'll see if he does have anything to pull out of the bag later in the race. But Sam Blacklock definitely is going to have to think about something that he can do to try and just beat the absolute raw pace of Josh Rogers. And what you were saying about him conserving tyres, Bo, is definitely something that he can think about doing to try and outwit Josh, rather than just going out on pure pace.
Yeah, well, that could be the case, but at the moment, just having a look at Thomas Millen as he wags the car through the penultimate corner, trying to get a run on James Duckworth, who has been locking up a little bit more than others and really starting to provide a bit of an opportunity heading in towards the Honda corner. Of course, we're a long way from Honda at the moment, plummeting down the first straight, heading towards the infamous turn number 1. But of course, for McMillan, he's not close enough. You can see just how powerful the slipstream is. And just having a look at the wind speeds, 28 kilometers an hour, so that's definitely going to be helping him quite a bit. But you can see the Duckworth just going a little bit slow on the mid-corner through this long left-hander at Southern Loop. You can see McMillan just trying to wind the power on a little bit earlier, trying to get that run, but the rears start to slip, and the run is gone. But he's still got good pace, as Duckworth, again, with a few connection issues, not helping McMillan, but he's the closest he's ever been, positions the car to the right side, and McMillan will have to go late, have to commit to it, and just can't quite do it. But Duckworth goes too wide, again, just leaving the opportunity on the inside, but has the overlap now, coming into Siberia, used the camber of the road effectively. You can see McMillan takes a wide line, goes for the cutback, and he tries to get the run heading towards Hayshed. Can't quite do it though. He's got the run, but not enough to challenge. But will he have something heading in towards Lukey Heights before the big dive into MG late on the brakes? But now it's all about setting the run up. You can see it goes a little bit wide, and whether that was strategy or a mistake, I'm not quite sure. I'm going to say that was a mistake, because Ross Rizzo now looking even more threatening as he now pinches the rear brakes as they all funnel into MG, and that is just one lap of Phillip Island. You can see just how many opportunities there are if the driver in front makes a little mistake.
Yeah, I think he was. I I think he was trying to go for a bit of a strategy up into Lukey Heights there, but I think he did actually make a mistake in trying to accomplish that. So Thomas McMillan definitely looking to find his way past James Duckworth at the moment, but this train's really starting to heat up, and even Chris Coxhead's been looking not too bad, just sitting behind this group of cars. He's got 5 cars who he can clearly see up ahead of him, all within a second to a second and a half of each other. So he's kind of just big time chilling back there and waiting for something to kick off so that he can make something work here. But these guys are really starting to get pretty close right now. And McMillan, once again, is going to go for a move as they come down into Honda, but just backs out actually really early on that one. And is maybe going to try and go for something else. And once again, Duckworth very, very wide, locking up those brakes and just carrying a bucket of understeer through Honda corner there. And McMillan looking for a way past once again. And this time he's got better traction as he comes out of Siberia. So he might be able to make that move that he was trying to do last time if he can not mess it up. So he's probably going to try and run a little bit deeper and wider and push up to the inside of the track as they come over the hill now, so which is the outside. And there he goes for the dive, but just not quite close enough. Duckworth giving a nice respectful amount of racing room there. And this is really holding up this pack now. It gives a little bit of a bump, McMillan does to Duckworth. And now Ross Rizzo is looking behind, and big moment there for McMillan as he came through turn number 11. That's going to kill a lot of his mid-corner speed and his exit speed. And now Rizzo's going to have a run on both of these guys. Sislowski might even have a run on Rizzo as well. So this is going to get a bit hairy as we come into the southern loop here. And turn number 1, Rizzo backs out early, but Duckworth is going to try and hold it around the outside, tucks back in as McMillan goes through, and Rizzo's there. A little bit of a bump for Duckworth, little bit of a bump for Rizzo from Sislowski. These guys are all rubbing bumpers with each other, and Guy Leach is not too far away from that as well. And now Chris Coxhead's gotten involved in the mix. He was just about a half a second back. He's now all involved, and these guys up ahead. Rizzo now goes for the move on Duckworth. Very late on the brakes. If he doesn't pull it up, he's gonna have trouble. He manages just skidding the car on the rear brakes there as they got all locked up. And now Scott Sislowski trying to go around the outside of Siberia on Duckworth. So Duckworth just losing a bucket of positions right now. Sislowski doing a good job on that outside line, keeping up the momentum. And it's very difficult for Sislowski to be racing here with Duckworth as he's just going in and out. We'll see if Duckworth can defend once again as they come through MG. So Scott Sislowski carries that mid-corner speed to the outside of the track, fires it down the inside at MG, and my goodness, I can't believe that he pulled that up. That was very skilled driving there from Scott Sislowski. And so himself, Ross Rizzo, and Thomas McMillan all make up positions on James Duckworth, who hasn't had the best lap. And now Guy Leach is coming down the main straight as well. Got a good run out of the final corner, did Guy Leach. And James Duckworth, he's going to go for the outside once again. Didn't pay off for him last time, but a little later on the brakes this time.
Bye, Duckworth.
Understeers. And I tell you, I had a very similar moment to that in a V8 Ute at this track, and it is not a fun experience. So James gets out of the gas, keeps it on the brake, and manages to keep it on the track. And now he's got Coxhead, who's almost the final piece in this puzzle, who's going to try and maybe go for a move as well. Does Coxhead down the inside on Duckworth, but pulls it up. And Duckworth, once again, just under pressure, really locking up those fronts and just carrying that understeer through the corner. He's got a good line now, and Coxhead going to go for an over-under, which I have to say probably isn't the best decision given the car position he had going into the corner, but he's going to try and make something work once again through Lukey Heights, as a couple of guys have tried doing on Duckworth, and Coxhead's seen 3 guys go through already. He's had a little bit of experience learning. Duckworth is also wised up a little bit, but not enough, because Coxhead's going to go down the inside, and a little bit of overlap there, not as much as he probably would have wanted, and he's going to have to tuck back in. But yeah, very poor couple of laps there for James Duckworth. And just behind them as well, Steve Jansen getting all sorts of lit up as he comes through the final section of corners.
And it might be about to get a little bit worse for Duckworth, because he has not got the run that he needs. And, well, this is going to be as easy a pass as I think he could like for Chris Coxhead. because he's already alongside, already got the overlap. But how brave is he going to be towards turn number one? It's about equal, actually, as they both apex at the same time, just about. And almost Duckworth finds the red quarter panel of Chris Coxhead, but Chris does manage to make the move happen. So the next on the train to get past Duckworth will be Steve Jansen, who is being very flamboyant, I think is the word, in his driving style. And now he actually gets the run as well. So Duckworth's stage is going from bad to worse. And he's probably a little bit far back as Steve Jansen, not able to do it. But if history says anything, it's that by Duckworth, you're off the road once again at Honda Corner. That apex is not your friend, and we'll see what Jansen can do. Will he go for the over-under as well? Will he elect to take the long way around the outside and get inside for Hayshed? He tries that and gets the power down so early, but Duckworth, I think Jansen, actually had to come out of the throttle. He was on it so early, but he still gets the inside. It's going to be so close with Duckworth. Jansen's just about in the grass on turn in as well. And in turn, that means that he has to back out of it, heading towards Loogie Heights, but he's close enough to attack into MG. Late on the brakes, he will go, but doesn't quite get there. He's kind of there now. He's up to the inside, and he's now got the position on James Duckworth as well. So Duckworth, 13th to 15th in a single lap, but it was a lot worse on the other lap as well. So for Duckworth, it's going from bad to worse here tonight at Phillip Island, as we have had another driver retire. That's going to be David Miller, who has found himself out of this race. So we'll go back, see what has happened to him. But he's not the first casualty, of course. Sam Sutton, earlier in this race, did find himself retiring. And for David Miller, it was just a big moment out of Southern Loop. And I didn't actually end up hitting anything from what I can see. But then loops it out of Honda, perhaps just not feeling the balance of the Redback Racing Team car tonight, and decides to pull it off and just let the drivers who are still racing have a bit more safety with one less out of control car.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the Redback Racing boys will be thankful that they don't have another chassis to pay for if he keeps on driving in that manner. So probably best for everyone that he bails out of it. But very unfortunate there for David Miller. He's been pretty consistent throughout this series, so I'm sure we'll see him back for another one. But man who's been consistently in the action tonight, Dot Suzlowski, he's coming up behind Ross Rizzo at the moment, and has been looking fairly strong in the last couple of laps. And Rizzo has been doing a really good job throughout this entire series, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Rizzo right now doing a lot of fuel saving, and also possibly a little bit of tire conservation as well, which would go hand in hand with the fuel saving. But we saw, was it last weekend, Ross, or last week, Ross had a podium, if I'm not mistaken. So he's been doing really well this season, and definitely sitting down in position number 10 is probably a little bit lower than we would expect him to see. But you can almost be guaranteed that when it comes down to the Trick Sim Sports guys, they're going to have a few tricks up their sleeve when it comes to the pit stop strategy. And Rizzo, I'm sure, will be no exception tonight. We will take you up there to Harlow and Haber, because, as I said earlier, once these guys get together, it's definitely not going to be helping their races. And in fact, Brady Myers has actually worked his way past Haber, who doesn't look comfortable. We saw David Miller not looking very comfortable in his Redback Racing machine. Well, now Harley Haber's starting to struggle in his Redback Racing machine, albeit in a slightly brighter looking Redback Racing car than we saw for David Miller in the Breast Cancer Foundation colors there. Very nice to see. But these guys have put on, Harlow and Haber have put on a really good show the last few weeks, and you can just see the amount of understeer that Harley Haber is suffering with right now. And we were talking about those lockups before, Bo, and all that energy being transferred through the tire. And while in iRacing we still don't have the flat spots on the tire yet, it does still pick up the temperature of the tire, and that's definitely going to affect the way that the tire behaves as it comes into the next corner. And you can see that Harley Haber right now, he's trying to go for those apexes, but the car's just not responding in the way that he wants at all.
No, it's not, and it's going to be extra bad towards turn number 1, which we're about to approach, as well as Southern Loop. So for Jackson Harlow, he is in a beautiful spot right now to really get a good run and try and attack heading in towards Honda Corner. Actually, Harley was not as bad as I thought through turn number 1, but check out turn number 2. Apex, error 404, Apex not found, and he's sideways on the exit. He's going to do a bit of lawn mowing as well. Unfortunately, it's Jackson Harlow's car that's in the grass color, but Harley is doing his best to paint his as well, but he does have the inside for the next corner if he so wishes. It was getting so close, almost contact, as Harley so late on the brakes. Goodbye, Apex, once again. And he takes Jackson Harlow with him as well. So there's been history between these two. Of course, think back to Sebring, which was one of the most incredible fights I think we have ever commentated on in this series, Zach. And well, we saw it again in the next round after that. And once more, we could be after something more, but we'll go a little bit further down the field because check this out with Kyle Stokes and Zach Baker. Stokes gets the apex absolutely beautifully to make a great pass, but the only issue is Zach Baker. Oh, Vlasic almost up the inside as well. Almost creates a bit of a bottleneck there. So Stokes was going to be under a lot of pressure from Zach Baker, but out of nowhere, Vlasic just completely got in the way and has ruined that battle just a little bit. So let's get a replay to try and see what on earth happened to Mario Vlasic to cause that issue there out of the Siberia corner. And oh, we're seeing that right about now. He was in a battle with the driver of Jacob Knight. And oh, that's not one I'm going to commentate on, Zach.
Yeah, I've only looked at one particular view on that one, and yeah, don't know 100% what happened there. Yeah, we'll probably
Lots of wheel spin.
Yeah, we'll probably say for our sake, though, we'll probably just leave it at that and let the boys do the talking after the race if they choose to do so. But there have been some other very good battles. Right now, we're on board with Sizlowski, who is still tucked up behind Ross Rizzo and has been looking very strong on the brakes as well. Is Scott Sizlowski looking very good as he comes through Honda there, and has just been edging himself up bit by bit to the back of that Trick Sim Sports car. And as I said previously, Ross Rizzo could be doing a little bit of fuel saving here to try and make the second stint work a little better. But Vlasic is now coming under attack from Zach Baker, who was he actually just got back past Baker after being overtaken after having that unfortunate incident before. So he's now got Kyle Stokes up ahead of him, who he'll be looking to pass, and Zach Baker will probably try and follow Vlasic up as well, because Baker and Stokes were also having a good battle, although Kyle Stokes did get punted off very early in the race and is having a little bit of a recovery session in this one, and he's starting to hunt down James Duckworth, who's been definitely struggling for the last few laps and finds himself about 5 seconds behind Duckworth does Kyle Stokes. But the lead up at the front, ladies and gentlemen, we'll just touch on that for you quickly because we are nearly 30 minutes into this race now. Lap number 19 of 46. Josh K. Rogers holding it strong out the front of the field. He's got a 4.5 second advantage over Sam Blacklock at the moment, who then carries a 2.4 second advantage over Brett Loxton. And Cooper Webster not too far behind him as well. Brady Myers has been showing some impressive times.
Harley Haber almost got a massive punt in the side there from a Jackson Harlow heading into Siberia, who went for a bit of an opportunistic gap that wasn't quite there. But these two are fighting once again, and the second Jackson gets even slightly close, he's going to go for a gap, and there could be a gap heading in towards MG right about now, because look at that, straight down to the inside. Very pointy car does Jackson Harlow have, but unfortunately the Redback Racing Team car has the track position at the moment, just able to defend where he needs to, but he is just suffering for the life of him that he cannot get the car turned in. That is the final corner. It's not too difficult to meet the apex, and he still didn't quite get it. A bit closer than he was on the previous lap, but just cannot get the car, the front end, where he needs, and losing speed, of course, with the slipstream advantage that Jackson has heading in towards turn number 1 now. And you can see that Harley can make turn number 1 happen pretty well, but I would not be surprised to see him push a little bit wide through turn number 2. Of course, just going a little bit wide, trail braking. Jackson Harlow now has the overlap, almost got to the rear quarter panel as well of the Redback Racing Team car as they now funnel through Casey Stoner corner, the very small little left kink, which is actually a bit difficult on worn tires in the supercar. And then, of course, Honda, where Harley Haber's going considerably later on the brakes. So late that, well, he's going to be under attack now heading into Siberia. But actually, in doing so, gets an okay run and might be able to defend. But Harlow goes for the gap that isn't quite there again and makes the gap. So he forces the door open. But that outside line with the camber of the road, Harley just able to use it and just pull away before Hayshed.
Yeah, both these guys doing a really good job of being both defensive and attacking. And Harlow, once again, just taking any opportunity to show the nose and force Harley Haber into a mistake here, which is he's got the pace to keep it up at the moment. He can definitely make that a viable option. And Suzlowski just in the background on Ross Rizzo as well, getting very close to the rear of that car. Now Guy Leach and Chris Coxhead are starting to close up on those guys as well. So Ross Rizzo just bottlenecking this pack up a little bit now. Once again, we obviously saw those 5 cars within about a second and a half of each other earlier in the race. So definitely not afraid to get close to each other is this group of cars, but it does seem like McMillan's now got a little bit of a gap, about 0.6 of a second out from Ross Rizzo, and Scott Solowski's really been looking for a way past the last few laps, and he might even be looking to get up there with his All-Star Motorsports teammate and look to make a bit of a breakaway from this pack that they have here. So Stolowski, once again, nice exit. We've seen him excellent under brakes coming into Honda. He's about a car length and a half back, which I fear is just a little bit too much. You can see how much of that he closes back up in the braking zone. A little bit of a late apex there, not actually quite meeting the apex of that corner, and loses a bit of ground to Rizzo. So a little bit of
Oh,
breathing space there.
yeah, Jackson Harlow's found his way past, and it was a big dive once again into Siberia, down the inside, and actually, they made contact, and how many times have we seen that? Just a little bump there, of course. I think in touring car terms, that's an okay pass. I wouldn't be too worried about that. That is a very cliche touring car pass. But out of nowhere, Harlow has found his way past the driver of Harley Haber, which he'll be happy with. But unfortunately, all that battling they've been doing, as we saw the contact there just on screen, all that battling they've been doing has brought another H driver. It's not Haber, it's not Harlow, it's Brenton Hobson coming into the fight.
Yeah, and Harley Haber's sitting in his favorite position, so Jackson Harlow is now. Brenton Hobson will definitely be looking to move himself up into 6th position, and he's only got a couple of seconds separating between him and that at the moment. But a man who's been struggling the last few laps, or the last part of this race, really, James Duckworth. He's now coming up on Jacob Knight, who's in that BestJet sponsored car, number 17 car, as they come through turn number 1 and into turn number 2. Very late and wide entry there from James Duckworth. He's going to take some nice speed through there. We'll quickly just duck up to Scott Kozlowski, who's just ever so slightly closer to Ross Rizzo, but once again, just not quite close enough. And just going back to Duckworth and Niners. Duckworth goes very, very deep, and just manages to pull it up, and yeah, kept the rears locked pretty much all the way through that braking zone, and able to pull it up and get the pass done on Jacob Knight there. And we will get a replay on board for you with that, ladies and gentlemen, because that was a bit of an experience there with James Duckworth as he came down into the braking zone there, hit the brakes just about the 150 board, and you can see just getting the rear of the car all sorts of loose, and turning left, turning right, turning left, turning right, just to keep it straight. Manages to clear it through the apex of the corner. So nice car control there from James Duckworth, and he moves himself up into 16th position.
Yep, so we have our first cars in the pit lane now. I noticed a couple laps ago we had Mario Vlasic dive into the pits. Now we have Brenton Hobson, and so clearly the drivers are trying to split this race in two, but Hobson, who was just behind Jackson Harlow, of course, just behind Harley Haber, he's going for the undercut, and that could not be a bad shout. As one little battle that has closed up quite a bit in the last few laps has been Brett Loxton and Cooper Webster, as Loxton did have a fair gap over Webster, but that has just been slowly clawed back and back and back over the last few laps. Cooper Webster being one of the only few cars on the track to actually stay in the 1 minute 30 bracket. So he's got a lot of pace in the Evolution Racing Team car. And the KRF car at the moment just looking a little bit more vulnerable as we head in towards the end of the stint. But being the halfway point in this race now, Zach, we could very well see a flurry of activity any moment now.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I was actually thinking before this race that there were too many laps to recover for these guys to do a one-stopper, but it seems pretty evident now that most of these guys are going to be trying for that. So we'll have to see how that plays out. If any guys have to do a little bit of saving in the second half of this race. But now Duckworth going for a move on Brendan
Oh,
Jackson, who comes across very late.
bang!
And there's a bit of a hit there, and I can't say that was entirely on James Duckworth there. That was a bit of a messy affair from both of them. We do have a lot of cars on the pit lane now. Looks like we've got Josh Rogers, your race leader, Sam Blacklock in second, Brett Loxton in third position as well, have all come in, as has Cooper Webster, Jackson Harlow, Harley Haber, Brady Myers, Guy Leach, Chris Coxhead. So pretty much your entire top 8 there or thereabouts. We've also got Duckworth and Brendan Jackson coming into the pit lane as well. But there are a lot of drivers. The only ones who have stayed out so far of note, Tom McMillan, Ross Rizzo, Scott Solosky, Steve Jansen have all stayed out for the time being. So a couple of cars now coming out of the pit lane. Hard to see if...
Hobson's jumped Haber, and he's going to jump Harlow as well. Harlow really thought about blocking there on Brenton Hobson, who was already up to racing speed. That undercut has worked perfectly for Brenton Hobson.
And we've seen it happen many times throughout this series. And as we said before, that gap up to 6th place for Hobbo was only about a second and a half. And the lap times that we're seeing from guys on the tyres at the moment, they're around a second and a half to 2 seconds slower on those older tyres. So Brendan Hobson really utilising the strength of his fresh grip on those Dunlops and making his way up into position.
Oh, McMillan spun the pits! McMillan has spun from the race lead. Of course, not the effective race lead, but braking for the pit lane. He's rotated the All-Star Motorsports Falcon, and he's going to get a speeding penalty as well, but he's just got his own penalty by completely ruining what could have been a great opportunity on a different strategy.
Yes, he did. We'll just get a oh my God, he really overcooked that, didn't he? We'll just get a replay for you on screen, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah, that was very unfortunate. And yeah, I suspect that he will be serving a penalty for that as well. And so he is, because he's been sitting there for a long time. But we'll go now to Jacob Knight, who is following James Duckworth, as they still have a little bit of a battle after this pit stop phase. But it looks like for the most part, Ross Rizzo's probably been the biggest winner out of the pit stop strategies there. He was sitting in about position number 11, I believe, before we came in for those pits. He's now sitting in position number 9. McMillan, the biggest loser, obviously, having made that mistake. Coxhead managed to get past Guy Leach in that pit stop phase, and obviously Brenton Hobson was able to get past Jackson Harlow and Harley Haber. So a couple of movers and shakers throughout the pit there, but no one doing anything absolutely extraordinary. No one jumping 6 to 10 places or anything like that crazy at the moment. Fastest pit stop, it looks like, was for Chris Coxhead, actually, a 49.4. And Ross Rizzo also about that, a 49.5. So those guys obviously on a very different strategy. Most other competitors took about 55 seconds in the lane, 54 to 53 seconds in the lane. So a significant drop in time there for Ross Rizzo and Chris Coxhead in the pit lane. And that's gotten them a couple of positions. I wonder, though, if they'll have to do much fuel saving in the second half of this race to try and make that strategy work for them.
Well, they might have to, so we'll wait and see. But of course, pitting that extra lap might just about save them just to get to the end of the race without too much fuel saving. But another driver that has really won out through the pit stop phase has actually been Brady Myers. He was sitting in P5, I believe, before the stops, but he is just so much closer to the back of Cooper Webster and Brett Loxton, just a few car lengths in front as well. So for Brady, out of nowhere, he's in a fight for a podium if he can clear Cooper Webster. We know how quick Brady can be on his day. Of course, think back a couple of seasons ago to that amazing battle he had with Mark Mullen at Circuit Imola, I believe it was, where he almost, and Bathurst, of course, where he almost won the race, should have convincingly, but had a bit of an engine issue. Sorry, Brady, but nonetheless, another battle that has been happening and will always be happening involves the driver of Harley Haber. He always finds himself in a scrap, and he's not far away from the back of his longtime rival, Jackson Suzlin Harlow, who isn't far away from Brenton Hobson. And Zach, just for a second, do you want to guess what position Brenton's in?
Yeah, definitely. He'll be in sixth because that's his favorite position, and that's where he always wants to be, right?
You would be correct. So Branson does hold sixth at the moment, but I have to say, of course, he pitted one lap earlier than the rest of the field, so he does have to fuel save quite a lot in this final stint. How long will he be able to hold on? Because Jackson Suzlin Harlow has great pace. We know Harley Haber has great pace for the first half of the stint. So how is this little battle going to transpire for the top six? I reckon it could be a fantastic fight in the coming few laps, especially once we get lap times in, as a Hobbo does a 30.5, a 30.4 for Harlow, and a 30.3 for Haber. So a perfect scrap as they all just close in bit by bit by bit. So we'll see how that transpires over the next few laps. But one driver that has to make a comeback is Thomas McMillan, who, of course, had that massive issue in the pit stop. We saw that he has a great car underneath him today, but unfortunately, he does have to find his way past now Guy Leach, who I have to say has been one of the absolute latest breakers in the Honda corner so far this race.
Yeah, there's been a few of them, and it's one of those places where, you know, if you're really feeling confident on the pedal, you can do it. And Guy Leach has been doing a very good job of defending his position by doing so. But we've seen quite a few Duckworth, we've seen Haber as well, and Harlow both going very deep into there. I just wanted to touch as well quickly on Brady Myers, because we kind of said that he came out of nowhere, but he prior to that pit stop phase, he kind of, the first phase of the race, he kind of dropped off those leaders quite substantially, but then about lap 15 through to lap 22, he really started clawing that gap back to the point where he was only 3 odd seconds behind Cooper Webster, and now we can see that that gap is only 0.8 of a second. So he's been doing a phenomenal job, and especially in that pit stop phase, to really draw that gap back up. And I think with the pace that he's shown prior to those pit stops, that he really could be in genuine contention for that final spot on the podium this evening. And even if Sam Blacklock doesn't start hurrying up as well, that could be a bit interesting. But Thomas McMillan now is going to get a run on Guy Leach, possibly if he doesn't get checked up halfway through the corner. And actually, Guy Leach just picks up a bit of understeer halfway through the corner there. And now McMillan is almost going to be bumping him down through Stoner Corner and gets on the brakes a little early to try and straighten that car up, go for a bit of a crisscross here. So he's going to go late in and take plenty of exit speed, but unfortunately, car not reacting the way he wanted midway through that corner, but he goes for a dive down the inside into Siberia, and that's a very late move, but very nicely done. Guy Leach is going to see, as we've seen so many times, he's going to have that momentum coming on the outside of the corner, and he's going to run McMillan out of road, which is very unfortunate. I don't think that that was necessarily Guy Leach's fault there, but they both kept it on track for the most part, where they can still actually be battling with each other. And McMillan's going to go round the outside at MG, and that'll give him the inside for 11 and 12, but unfortunately, just not quite able to make it work. And I don't think that was... Guy Leach didn't really have a lot of room to move there, and maybe the car just came a little bit funny off that curb, so can't really blame him for running McMillan out of road there. It's just kind of a bit of a racing incident, but they managed to get through. But now the battle that we have been anticipating has come to fruition. It seems Harley Haber is on the back of Jackson Harlow once again, and these guys are going to go for it. Harley Haber's been good on the brace. Oh, a lot of opposite lock through. Got very late on the brakes. My
Goodbye.
Goodness, that's way too late. And a little bit of a bump as he comes through on the inside there, but it is job done for Harley Haber, and I'm sure that Harlow will be responding in extremely due course, quite aggressively without a doubt, and already showing the nose once again. And Harlow's been showing the nose at any opportunity.
Leach! Yep, Leach has gone around in a scrap with Thomas McMillan once again. He had the inside for Siberia this time, and McMillan around the outside. And Leach just tried to get on the power just a tiny bit too early, and half rotates the VR46 car and loses a spot to Steve Jansen as well. So not what he would have wanted but nonetheless, at least he is still in the race. As we'll turn our attention back to Jackson, Susan Harlow, and Harley Haber. And this is a very interesting fight because we know that Haber's car will die off in the remaining laps, but I don't think Jackson's too keen on waiting for the final few laps. The battle that never seems to want to go away, and there's a bump. Hello, Harley Haber. They have a bit more corner speed on the entrance into this. And at this point, I'm thinking of just calling 000 because I want the police, because there is about to be a fight, and it's going to happen with Jackson Harlow up the inside into Southern Loop. And Haber has to be sent out wide, but we've seen how late he's willing to be on the brakes heading in towards Honda corner. So what can Jackson Susan Harlow do? Will he be willing to go as late as Haber was on the last time around? The answer is no, because Haber's going to throw it around the outside. But unfortunately, that move looks to be already done. So they change hands once again. And Brenton Hobson will be absolutely loving this because it's just a couple more laps for him to run in position number 6 at the moment. But you can see Haber does not want to give this up because he knows if he doesn't make this pass soon, his tires are going to die off again, and Jackson will just be able to drive off into the sunset.
Yeah, it's been really peculiar watching Harley Haber, especially through Southern Loop, because he seems to consistently run this line, which is obviously not working for him unless he's I guess trying to attack for some reason. But every time he runs this wide line through turn number 2, Jackson Harlow just comes in and swoops that position away. So it's been a little confusing to me as to why he's continued to run that line, whether he just keeps on going a little bit too deep into that corner or he's suffering with an understeer issue or whatever. It does seem very bizarre that he's running so consistently wide at the apex, like at the mid corner through Southern Loop there. It's really killing the amount of speed that he has through the corner. But as we can see through other sections of the track, he does have very good car speed, and we'll see if he does it here again. And yeah, see, this time following another car, he doesn't seem to have any issues holding a tighter line, and probably a little bit wide at the mid corner there to kind of couldn't square up the exit of the corner as much as he wanted to. He's been doing that quite a bit, I have to say, through Stoner Corner. He has been getting a lot of opposite lock, and it's a difficult corner in a V8 supercar because you really do want to keep the power on 100%, but you have to fight to keep it in there.
I was going to say, because so many laps I've been watching from a TV camera, and I've just watched on board then, and it was completely sideways. And I thought for sure he was going around, but it just was not the case. As this battle for position number 3 just continues to get a little bit closer as Cooper Webster tries to knock down the lap times compared to Brett Loxton. But I heard the point you were trying to make earlier, and that was that Sam Blacklock, if he doesn't start to push a little bit more, he could potentially come under threat. Because there is still 15 laps to go, and with only a 4-second margin at the moment, we've seen 4-second gaps come down in a lot less laps than that. So we'll see what the pace is last time around, and Loxton has just about matched Sam Blacklock on this lap. So Blacklock is trying to respond a little bit, and he does have the margin to play with, but he cannot afford to make a mistake still, because he can still very much lose that spot that he's in at the moment and lose valuable points in this championship. But still many battles happening out on circuit. We're just trying to see if any of them are willing to make a move around this circuit, because 46 laps, we're in the final stint now. This is where the points are paid, and all the drivers really have to make something count. But I think the battle still to watch has to be Haber and Harlow, and he's not quite close enough just yet to try anything at a Honda. But Harley Haber is really improved this season and is trying everything. You can see just how late he is on the brakes, and I'm amazed he actually pulled that up. Didn't quite make the apex. It was about probably half a millimeter off, I would say. And yes, I'm going to criticize you for that, Harley Haber, but nonetheless, doing a fantastic job. And when they're not fighting like this could actually benefit Harley Haber, because it allows the driver of Jackson Susan Harlow get to the back of Brenton Hobson, who he is catching by 0.4 of a second a lap. If those two start to battle, that's going to go right back into Harley's hands. So I think the best strategy for Harley into fighting Jackson right now is to not fight Jackson.
Yeah, I think they need to get an extra partner in this fight, and that's going to be Hobbo, because as well if they do continue to fight, they are going to find an extra partner, and it's going to be Ross Rizzo. And then if they continue fighting, they're going to find another partner, and that's going to be Scott Solosky, because those guys are tucked in as close as Haber and Harlow are right now. So yeah, if they continue to keep it up as they were, we're definitely going to see some extra hands in this fight. And I mean, that's definitely entertaining, and I want to see that. but for the sake of Harlow and Haber, they really want to just keep it cool and get a move on up to Hobbo and try and make something work a little further up the line. And Hobbo does look like he's struggling a little bit at the moment. Times have come back a little bit. Seems like everyone's lap times are starting to just fall off quite gradually, with the exception of Mr. Rogers out front, who's a clear 4/10 of a second faster than anybody else on the track at the moment. But yeah, it's amazing that even in the last 2 to 3 laps, the lap time seemed to have dropped off consistently across the field by almost 4/10 of a second. So you really only get a few decent laps out of these Dunlops before they really just start to fall off quite dramatically. And, you know, best laps for a lot of these guys are in the high 129s, and we're already in the high 1 minute 30s on these tires at the moment.
Yes, it's quite a big drop off, isn't it? And of course, that's not what you would like to see, especially when the drivers still have so many laps to go. Well, I mean, it's not what you like to see as a driver. Of course, you want the tires to be consistent throughout a stint, nice and predictable. For us as spectators, it's fantastic. The tires are constantly changing, the balance constantly moving in the car. They've got to play with their roll bars. Of course, we don't talk about that probably enough when broadcasting these series, is that the cars do actually have roll bar adjustments. You can change the balance consistently, as Cooper Webster still trying to reel in Brett Loxton, but still just not quite happening, and barely closed in at all in the last lap. Only 400ths of a second. So still a long way to go for Cooper Webster if he wants any chance of making a move for position number 3. But for Harley Haber, he's still trying to get to the back of Jackson Harlow, and a big slide once again through Stoner Corner. And you can see that they are now visibly making ground on the driver, Brenton Hobson, who just cannot quite match the lap times of the two behind. And I actually just want to quickly point out that Harley and Jackson, identical lap times last time around.
I'm reading a 1,000th of a second difference.
Well, you're wrong.
But I reckon that I'll give you that one, because 1,000th is definitely not a significant amount of time. But also, I've noticed that Scott Solosky just behind these guys is really starting to close up on Rizzo. Half a second was the amount of time that he was able to rein in on his competitor the last lap around, and definitely looking significantly closer than the last time he came through. So we'll see. They're about to come over the line once again, and we will see if we can grab some of these lap times for you, because it is very relevant at this stage in the race. So Hobbo a 31.1, Harlow a 30.8, Haber a 30.8, so closing in. Rizzo a 30.9, and Scott Szlosky actually a 31.0 that time around. So just marginally losing a tiny bit of ground, but still much closer than he has been in these last few laps to the back of Ross Rizzo. And just to give you some comparison, Sam Blacklock at the moment running 1:30.8. Brett Loxton, Cooper Webster running 1 minute 30.7, as is Brady Myers just behind them. So Brenton Hobson is really the definitely the slowest guy in the top 10 at the moment. And he's sitting in a bit of a vulnerable position, having 4 cars in such close succession lined up behind him, all waiting to snag away his favorite position. He's going to have the biggest battle for the rest of this race, I feel. However, there is always the chance that the guys behind him can start getting pretty hot and heavy with each other, and they have been doing so for the most part of this race. And we're now coming into the final chapter of this race. Just 11 laps to go, so pretty much in the final quarter of this race, and starting to brew with all the way from 6th through the 10th now, and I'm still not 100% sure that that final spot on the podium is sealed, because Cooper Webster a little bit faster that time round, and only 0.3 of a second behind Brett Loxton. In fact, he might even have a little bit of a run here. Brett Loxton, he got a pretty good exit out of Southern Loop there, actually, so I think he's going to hold on this time round. But that gap has definitely been getting smaller and smaller, and Cooper Webster is a driver that just keeps on getting stronger the more that he comes out and he does these races. He's always getting better and moving himself up through these fields. And Brady Myers is also not very far away from them, although he hasn't been showing the promise that we were hoping we would see earlier. That being said, he did take 0.3 of a second out of Myers and Loxton on the last lap. And with 11 laps left to go, that's definitely enough time for him to make something work with those guys.
Yeah, it definitely could be. And there are a lot of potential battles that could be brewing in these next few laps. But for Cooper Webster, definitely the closest it's been in a long time as Loxton continues to lock up an MG. And he's been pretty good in through Honda, but MG has definitely been his kryptonite in this race. So as the clock ticks to just 10 laps to go this time around across the stripe, Cooper Webster becoming more and more of a threat. And you can see that Loxton actually struggling with a bit of front and understeer as well. So it's not just Harley Haber that's struggling with that the potential little issue. It's happening at the front of the field as well. So Cooper Webster using the slipstream beautifully through turn number 1, but doesn't quite get the run he probably wanted. But Loxton actually quite slow as well. So he's having a different issue entirely, actually, in hindsight, to Harley Haber. He's struggling a lot more through the right-handers than through the left-handers. You can see he's a lot better through the southern loop, but through turn number 1, he could just not stop the car how he would have wanted. We can see, though, Cooper Webster just closing, heading in towards Honda, and this could get a little bit worrying for Loxton, who locks the rear tires. All of a sudden, a bit of a snap there, and you can see the balance of the KRF Motorsports car getting worse and worse. We said that there was a chance they could get to the back of Sam Blacklock. I think now Brett Loxton is just survival. Hold on to this podium spot and get whatever points you can get to make sure you consolidate second in the championship. Of course, I can't remember the points off the top of my head. But for Brett Loxton, he can't afford to play too safe. He's had a few probably off performances in the last few rounds. Hasn't scored the points he really needed to. And all of a sudden, that could open the door for someone like Cooper Webster, who has done all the rounds this season, has always performed strong. They could potentially snatch second in the title away.
Yeah, I believe that Cooper Webster is actually quite high in the points standings at the moment. So he's definitely, in fact, he is definitely the man that can take that position away from Brett Loxton, and is looking very, very hungry to do so. And I definitely would put it past him to be able to be capable of doing it. And just that time, a little bit better through turn number 1. Brett Loxton still looking to struggle a little bit, but Cooper Webster still taking this very shallow line through Southern Loop, and I think he really needs to change up his game plan when it comes to that, because he's got a really good car, seems to be working really well down the straight in that slipstream and through turns number 1. Oh my goodness, Brett Loxton. Wow, that was, and even Cooper Webster there had to do a bit of a checkup and definitely lost a little bit of ground just because he was unsure of the attitude of that KRF car up ahead of him.
And it's not over yet as well. As sorry to interrupt, but Brenton Hobson now well and truly under pressure from Jackson Suzlin-Harlow, who almost turned him at a Honda hairpin there. So although the gap's expanded to about 0.3 of a second or so now, it was a lot less than 0.3 of a second through Honda. And Hobbo had a nightmare of a lap last time around, lost half a second, not quite half a second, but almost, compared to Jackson Suzlin-Harlow. So he is under so much pressure right now, and with just 8 laps to go, it's the worst time to lose a spot, and you can see just locking up again. And we saw that at Zandvoort. The Senshi Sim Racing cars, whatever they've done to the setup, it is so prone to locking the inside front under load. So that just means that for Brenton Hobson, the tires are going to get worse and worse, like we saw with Harley Haber. But if he's under pressure, he starts to brake a little bit harder. He locks the brakes more. It's just going to compound the issue. You can see actually in the grass on the exit down the front straight. It's going to hurt his corner speed, main speed down the end of this straight as well. Everything right now for Brenton Hobson going on. There's so many things for him to think about. This could get to his head very, very quickly if he doesn't calm himself down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Webster and Loxton are still having a bit of a go as well. And in fact, Cooper Webster could have it on here. He's very close. He has to pull out because Brett Loxton takes the middle line of the corner very late, and he's run off the track. Has Cooper Webster, manages just...
Oh, Myers!
Myers is going to come in and maybe go around the outside here if he can. He's going to opt for the undercut or the over-under, try and get the better, straighter exit. Hasn't quite worked for him, but that is devastating for Cooper Webster, and just not quite lining his car up in the correct way as he came down into Honda there. And Brett Loxton rightfully defending his position in the middle of the track. Just caught Cooper Webster a little bit unguarded there, and that is a big loss for Cooper. So now he's got Brady, who's been doing an excellent job these last few laps, plugging away, bring that gap down, has been looking super quick. He's going to have to defend from him, but Jackson Harlow hasn't been able to make any inroads onto Brenton Hobson at the moment, still sitting behind, but Haber has managed to close up on
Oh,
Harlow
Webster!
now.
And Webster actually had a horrible run through the final corner, went right through the grass, all four wheels off. And that's just going to allow Brady Myers to be so much closer through turn number one. You can see this is the closest he's been by a country mile. And heading in towards Southern Loop, you can see he's going to position his car a little bit wider, take the wide line, as Cooper Webster's going to take a much wider line, but not on purpose. But that might actually save him. It allows him to straighten the car up a little bit earlier, and he actually should be able to protect himself here against the driver of Brady Myers. So that mistake has actually turned out to be a miracle for Cooper Webster, but behind it might not be many miracles for the driver of Jackson Harlow, who's actually got Haber a little bit closer than he is to Hobbo. We've seen how brave Haber has been on the brakes the last few laps, not able to do anything as Harlow actually so wide through Honda corner. That's going to allow Haber to sneak up the inside, potentially slam it up the inside through Siberia. Decides not to do it though, so for Haber, has to find another way back past the MFR car at the moment. So we'll turn our attention back to Webster, who's just managed to get himself a little bit of breathing room against Brady Myers, but you can never be comfortable, especially when the battle is this close, because Brett Loxton only a few car lengths in front, and Sam Blacklock not making a huge amount of ground either, doing a very slow 31.4, as lap traffic could also come into the play as well.
Yeah, I did notice just up ahead of these guys when I was looking at Webster and Loxton before, we've got Daryl Vandergeer, who's having a tough time maintaining control of his car, but has been doing so for 40 laps, which is definitely respectable, but just not quite at the pace of the other guys. And he might have just gotten in the way of Sam Blacklock on that last lap. And now Brett Loxton's coming up. So we'll see if Loxton has any trouble with this traffic here. And Vandergeer staying to the very outside of the circuit there in a very respectful manner, and very clearly allowing Brett Loxton through. So nothing too egregious there for the KRF driver. And now Cooper Webster's going to have to deal with that traffic as well. So we'll hope that he can get through just as easily. And you can see the performance difference between Cooper Webster and Daryl Vandergeer as they come into Honda there.
Oh, Haber! Oh, he's almost gone straight into the back there of Jackson Harlow. I thought for sure he was going to completely wipe out Jackson there. Heading in towards Honda corner, he was completely locked up on the rear brakes, getting closer and closer, and only just narrowly avoided him. And that is insane considering how many car lengths back he was. So very close. Racing Scott Zaslowski has a huge moment actually, trying to lap some traffic just through the ultra tiny little kink. Heading before Hayshed, he actually breaks loose in the ASM car and almost rotates that into the wall as well. So the race going from 0 to 100 very quickly at the moment. Cooper Webster being reeled in by Brady Myers bit by bit as well. That battle is not over by a long shot. Brenton Hobson still not able to find a way, gapping away from Jackson Susan Harlow as well. So that battle is one to watch. And if anything goes wrong, or if he makes another mistake in the Honda corner, Harley could find himself involved. And all this battling for these guys is now bringing Ross Rizzo and Scott Zaslowski into this fight as well, as we head to just 5 laps to go. It's getting ultra close here at Phillip Island.
Yeah, I know. I knew we were going to have some pretty good racing tonight, but I didn't think that we would have so many cars within such succession of each other towards the end of this race. We've now been going for 1 hour and 5 minutes since we started this race. And we've still got a few laps to go. So for the racing to still be this close at the end, very impressive from all of these guys. And Harlow is trying to keep that gap close to Hobbo up ahead, but just not quite able to get the car up to where he needs to be to get that position change to happen. And Harley Haber definitely hasn't been helping the situation, applying that pressure. But you're right, Rizzo and Zaslowski now really getting in there, but Thomas McMillan has been closing in on Chris Coxhead at quite a rapid pace, and McMillan, who had big dramas earlier in the race when he spun in the pit lane, just goes to show that never give up attitude can pay off, because now he is coming up onto the back of Chris Coxhead for position number 11, which is definitely not too bad at all, and trying to get the moves done. Is McMillan not quite close enough this time by to make anything work, but he has been closing in at a fairly tremendous rate. And those two guys are actually, in fact, McMillan is the second fastest car on the track at the moment. He's only 0.3 of a second slower than the race leader at the moment, Josh K. Rogers. So very good performance from here. But Cooper Webster has also been bringing that gap down to Brett Loxton after that mistake earlier, and that gap is back down to under 1 second now. So those guys could be on it for it very soon as well. And again, Cooper's going to bring Brady in to that equation also.
Oh, I'm more focused at the moment on this battle, including Brenton Hobson, Jackson Harlow, and Harley Haber. This is ultra close now because Ross Rizzo well and truly in this fight as well. It's a pure 4-car scrap for position number 6. And well, if anyone's going to hold it at the moment, it's rightfully Brenton Hobson. But for how much longer, I do have to wonder. He's constantly under pressure heading in towards turn number 1. But this back section of the circuit, I've got to say, he's actually looked okay. If he's going to be able to defend anywhere, I think this little section of the circuit could be the ones to do as McMillan tries around the outside of Hayshed. Not able to do it. Lukey Heights, though, is a different story, especially if you give a back bumper. Many back bumpers, actually, to the back of Chris Coxhead. Now looks to the inside of MG and will make the move happen. And by the looks of it, Coxhead leaving plenty of room and allowing McMillan through. But it will fight it back on the exit, though, so ignore what I said. Coxhead will continue to scrap it out. McMillan gets a big wiggle on the outside and a bit of a slide to boot as well, which is going to hurt his run all the way through this final corner where you're constantly just build momentum all the way to the exit. You can just hit the throttle all the way to the floor and make it happen down in the slipstream. It should be an easy overlap for McMillan, but he has to make it happen on the brakes as well. Of course, he can't afford to get too greedy and force himself off the grass through turn number 1, but it looks like McMillan has been able to hold on to it for now. So does make the move happen, being the second fastest car over the last few laps. He should be able to hold on to it unless Coxhead gives him a bit of a move. But all of a sudden, Harley Haber trying to make a bit of a move happen, as well as Harlow, who's just constantly haunting the back of Brenton Hobson in the Synergy Sim Racing car as they head into Siberia, when one of Jackson's favorite places on the circuit to make a pass happen. But look at Ross Rizzo in the background as well. He's not going to let this one go either.
No, he's not, and he was actually almost having a look at Harley Haber as they came into Honda there, but just didn't quite want to get himself involved in that one just yet. But Harlow has been looking very intense on the back of Hobson, and I reckon that if he doesn't, I mean, he's only got 2 laps now, so this is really do or die for these guys, and I'm sure that they are quite physically and mentally exhausted from this, so anything that they are going to do is going to be pretty desperate, and it's going to be very much interesting to watch. Not the best exit for Harlow out of the final corner, and looks like Hobson's going to be able to hold on just for the time being, but we will see as they come through Southern Loop, and very late on the brakes for Harlow as he comes in turn number 1, but taking the apex there nicely, carrying some decent mid-corner speed. He's just looking very confident on the brakes compared to Brendan Hobson at the moment, but still just not quite taking that wide line through the middle of the corner, and just gets it a little bit too aggressive on the accelerator, does Harlow, to try and make a move work out of the Southern Loop. So he's going to have to wait once again. And Harley Haber, he's just been absolutely monstrous on the brakes, and Ross Rizzo's picking up a trick or two behind him as well, because he's matched him in the braking zone, and Ross might even go for a look down into Siberia, but pulls out of it nice and easy. Oh, nope. A little bit of a tap on the Harley Haber there for Ross Rizzo, just gives him a little bit of a bump, and that's going to check up both of these guys, and that might just open up the gap to Hobbo and Harlow to just play around a little more than they would have otherwise been able to. But Harlow running very wide through Hayshed there and not being able to take a good line through Lukey Heights, and again compromising his run a little bit through MG. Rizzo's looking down the inside, can't quite get there once again, and looking very, very taily, lighting up those rear tires, putting too much energy through, and he just put too much heat through those rear tires now, and that gap to Haber up ahead he's just lost about half a second in that one little transaction there, so that's very unfortunate for Rizzo. He's got a lot of work to do to make up that gap, but Harlow is still the man looking for a way past Brenton Hobson, who, has to be said, has been doing a valiant job to keep himself in position number 6, his favorite position of all time, and running that wider line to defend from Harlow, who gets it Taylor on the exit once again, having to go for at least 2 to 3 stabs to catch that, and a little bit of grass on the exit to boot as well. Hobson going for a very aggressive line back across the racing line, locks up that inside brake though, and as we've seen, Harlow just so much better on the brakes than Hobson, and Haber even more so, with Ross Rizzo still lurking behind him. But those guys are actually catching up, but we are, I believe, actually on the final lap. And the man who has just absolutely taken this away, Joshua Rogers, he comes around the final corner and across the line with an absolutely commanding victory. So big congratulations to the TTL driver, but it is not quite done between Harlow and Hobson. Hobson just has one more corner to go before he can say that he came home in his favorite 6th position, and it looks like he is going to maintain it unless he goes for a little bit of a cough and a splutter as he comes over the line. Remember, 1 lap less fuel, but it looks like he's got the momentum. He's slowing, he's lost it, I think Harlow just got him as he came over the line there, and Szlowski out of fuel as he was coming over the line as well.
No, he's not going to finish, potentially.
He's not going to finish. Oh my
He's
goodness.
in the pit entry.
Wow. So just when we thought it was all said and done, I don't know why I made that mistake of calling it before the last corner, because every time that happens, somebody runs out of fuel, and it's something that we've seen so many times in this V8 Supercar series, which just goes to prove how fine these guys were cutting it on the strategy this evening. Brenton Hobson, had he had what, 100 mil more fuel in that car, he would have been able to come home in 6th position, but unfortunately for him, he wasn't. And yeah, very unfortunate, but that was a very long race there, Bo, and was actually very entertaining for a very substantial portion of that race.
Yeah, it definitely was. And in the end, after 70 minutes of racing, it would be the TTL Esports Falcon of Joshua K. Rogers who would win. And pretty convincingly, it has to be said, in the end, of course, by 16.8 seconds over Sam Blacklock, who in the end only finished 0.8 of a second ahead of Brett Loxton. So they closed up right at the finish, but of course, Blacklock backing off on the final lap as well. Cooper Webster will bring it home in position number 4 for Evolution Race, team with Brady Myers making it 2 TTL cars in the top 5. Jackson Susan Harlow will come home in position number 6, just cruelly stealing it away in the dying few moments from Brenton Hobson, who does coast across the line just half a second away from what would have been his absolute favorite position. Harley Haber comes home in position number 8 with Ross Rizzo and Thomas McMillan recovering for your top 10.
Yeah, then we had Chris Coxhead, who moved himself up from 16th into 11th. Nice job from him. Steve Janssen finished in position number 12. Guy Leach, after a bit of a half spin earlier in the race, which set him back a little bit, managed to recover up to 13th position. James Duckworth had a strong start, but it just started to fade through that second phase of the race, and he found himself back down in 14th position. Jacob Knight moved himself up into 15th. Kyle Stokes, he recovered fairly well after some big dramas early on, getting pushed off the circuit in the braking zone down at MG, came home in 16th position. Brendan Jackson in 17th, and Scott Solowski, unfortunately, running out of fuel on that final lap and just managing to scrape it over the line, it would seem. And then we had the first of our lap finishes. Mario Vlasic in 19th, Zach Baker in 20th position, Daryl Vandergeer in 21st, Mark Hallinan in 22nd, and then sorry, those guys were all a lap down. And then the first of our non-finishers, David Miller, who just decided to park it after a couple of unfortunate spins for him earlier in the race, and Sam Sutton also succumbing to the Phillip Island circuit as well, and only managing to complete 10 rotations down on the beautiful coast of the Bay of Victoria. And it was a absolutely fantastic race tonight, ladies and gentlemen. But Bo, I believe we have plenty more action to come here on the SimSpeed Network.
Yeah, we definitely do. It's actually a little bit more of a quieter week, but nonetheless, still plenty happening here at SimSpeed TV, which of course includes on Friday night. We have the LeBlanc Australian Online Supercar Series at round 16. And I'm just looking at the broadcast. Apparently, it's at a to be announced track from what I can see. So, perhaps a little bit of a mystery for the drivers there. So, they want to prepare for the race, but who knows what track it could be? That's going to be a little bit of an interesting challenge for the drivers. And I believe also on this weekend, on a Sunday as well, we do have the V8 Scops. It's round number 15, and it's going all the way down to the finale. Road America, we've seen it decide so many championships, including the absolutely grandstand finish, including Madison Down in 2015, I believe it was. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, Jared Philcell and Ethan Gregot can make themselves into yet another close finish in the title points. But Zach, that's another round of this series done. And well, we've only got one round left. I'm not 100% sure where it is, but nonetheless, if it's anything like the rest of the season has been, it should be another great race.
Yeah, I don't think. I think there's only really one race this entire series, as in this season, that has been a bit so-so. But every other race has been absolutely fantastic, and you have to go with the statistics that we've got so far. That it's going to be another absolute cracker. So I think, yeah, I don't know where it is, but it's going to be good, and everyone should definitely tune in. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll just remind you once again, in case you haven't already, if you haven't smashed subscribe on the iRacing Esports Network, make sure you do hit that for us now. Don't forget to leave a like on this video as well. And if you also would be kind enough to head over to the SimSpeed TV YouTube channel and chuck us a subscribe there as well, that would be greatly appreciated. But from myself, Bo Albert, and Scott Fountain on the keys here at SimSpeed TV, we do very much thank you for joining us this evening. And until next time, we'll see you then.